let me take you far, far away. However, to one of the most interesting persons, I think, that we will have occasion to talk about, that being, of course, Elizabeth. And I was just talking to a friend of mine about how many movies and how many books there are, she having read virtually all of them or seen them, eaten a lot of popcorn, I dare say. But it's basically an idea of, we are all just fascinated by the figure of Elizabeth. And I might say, as I go through, maybe I'm just going to have to say Cousin Mary or Sister Mary to differentiate them, because they come up over and over again. And you say, how does Elizabeth stack up with the two Marys? Well, we understand she stacks up very well indeed, because she is the ruler for much of the 16th century, and she is in a position to hold and maintain her authority. And we often wonder about the Marys. I mean, they are very interesting. We give them their due. But we know that, of course, neither Mary, Queen of Scots, nor Mary Tudor can compare. A lot of that, of course, will have to do with the fact that Elizabeth is unmarried. She will be able to utilize, I won't say use, utilize men for purposes, but at the same time, not to be used by them. And that is a great skill and an important asset if you're going to be ruler in the 16th century. We start off by noting that, opposed to her sister and predecessor, who had to deal with the Spanish husband, Philip II, had to deal with the issues that Mary had to deal with, Elizabeth had her own share of problems. I mean, could you imagine being the mother of the daughter, rather, of someone whose mother had been executed and who had been basically discarded? You talk about some psychological issues. But somehow, and again, some of you who are maybe more Elizabethan than I am may know how she dealt with all this in her early years, because, as some of you know, she may well have come close to death when Sister Mary thought, you know, sis, I really don't need you around anymore. I think you are really annoying. And, you know, her life expectancy, she died at age 69. So I think that's mighty good for that particular period. But it's at the same time clear that she did not have an easy early life, I wouldn't think. The fact that she survived and became queen is almost happenstance that Mary didn't get around to doing away with her. That is, Sister Mary. Because, of course, the Boleyns were not exactly in style. Remember that Anne Boleyn died because she supposedly had sex with her brother and other trumped up charges. So I imagine most of the Boleyns had either retired or died by the time Elizabeth grew up. So all of this then to say is that Elizabeth is the last of the Tudors, and many would say, and I don't think I'll be disputed here, the greatest of them. The apogee. Some people have said she is definitely her father's daughter, imperial. Maybe, but I would prefer to think she's really her own person. She does have characteristics in some ways like him, but in others different. This particular portrayal of Elizabeth is one that she would have liked, I suspect. And like many of us, though I'm sure no one here, she was somewhat vain. But I'm thinking that when you are a ruler and you have people around you that could be classified, I suppose, as sycophants, who tell you about how great you are and how attractive you are, you kind of get used to it and you like to hear it. And of course, we know that she probably had lots of wigs and thinning hair and incredible numbers of outfits. I don't believe she ever went casual. Okay, so Dean Cater would not have any reason to bring her in because she wouldn't have come to class in jeans, no, or anything of the sort. I think she was always, at least you sense, gotten up. I mean, could you imagine going to class without being made up, you know, without your makeup? I think not. I mean, just rolling out of bed. The first time I had one come to my class in a cap, I control myself, don't worry. But it was hard. It was hard. I said, you were lucky Dean Cater's gone, because that would be serious. But she, maybe it was just a matter of having the look. You know how you used to read those advertisements, you want to look official, you want to look executive, all those books that came out. When was it? The 80s? Sometime back there. That may have been part of it, but I'm not sure that other rulers didn't want to look good too. But they make quite a big deal about this in the case of Elizabeth, about how she wanted to constantly look good and how much time she worried about the issue, which I think there's actually a major in now, public relations, you know, all of those kinds of issues. And you thought, do you really need to do that academically? That's another matter. I'll just say that this is a matter of constantly on her mind, and possibly it had to do, as we're going to see, because she was a woman, because she wasn't married, because she was so concerned about issues of her authority and control. So reaching out to the masses of people, we see over and over again, she always spent a lot of time. Could you imagine how the Secret Service would feel about a ruler like this? Because I think she spent a lot of time in what I guess we would call now working the crowd. And it's absolutely amazing when you think about it in that day and age. Not that I guess she was worried about anarchists, but we will see she was worried about other people, and with reason to be so. But all of that said, she did have major issues, and one of them, of course, being the issue of religion. Now, it's true, her father took the first step by making himself, through Parliament, head of the church. And he was more or less declared head of the church by Parliament. He said, yes, I am. And don't you forget it. It's like, you remember last time we talked about they cut off the annates, the payments to the Pope, and all of the other gratuities given to Rome or any of that. And actually, Sister Mary, Bloody Mary, if you will, never really tried to restore the Catholic Church. I mean, monasteries are gone, folks, as far, because remember all the real estate? That isn't coming back. So you may be a nostalgic Catholic and say, gosh, I miss those monks. And, you know, we used to have so much fun out hoeing and picking. Well, get over it. God, that's gone. And it's not merely because they had that little Protestant period under Edward VI, because he didn't last long, did he? 6 years. But even under Mary, another 6 years, there was no serious concern about bringing back monasteries. It was more or less bringing back papal authority, bringing back more the Catholic beliefs. But I suppose once the change had come about, and some would say the circumstances of Elizabeth's parents, she decides she can't go Catholic. Now that begs the question of, what do you suppose she was brought up as? I'm not sure. I'm really not. I think she was probably brought up to follow whatever was the latest style. You know, if your brother Edward was king, hey, let's go Calvinist. And then Sister Mary comes in. I love me some Catholicism. I mean, you know, it must not have been that hard for her. I mean, the woman was a polyglot, 5 languages at least. Yeah. I mean, you wonder, it's just a gift, people who are like that. I just think it's wonderful for the rest of us to know people like that. It's like, let's see, we go Spanish, French, Italian, Latin, and Greek, and I'm thinking, and English, obviously, but it is incredible that she would have been that gifted. But I just thought I would throw that in the sense of someone who must have had many abilities and many skills, and at the same time was very, very concerned about religious appearances. And so I guess sometimes today we think, Elizabeth, of course she was Protestant. Well, I'm not so sure if I would go, I think if the Catholics may have played their cards right, but if you were the daughter of Anne Boleyn, and I'm not trying to make this into a novel, so I don't want you to think there's anything romantic about this, that she meets some guy in church and so she decides to go Calvinist. I don't see that at all. I think this is a matter of how the Catholic Church regards her. You are the daughter of someone who, how can I say this? Your mother broke up a marriage ordained by God. So you know what that makes your mother? Yes, you can, it's like your mama. You can wear that red A, lady. In other words, The idea is that it would be very hard for Elizabeth to be accepted by the Catholic Church. You have to admit, maybe there would have to be some serious negotiation between Elizabeth and the Catholics, and as to how far you can go to denounce your mother as a wretched harlot and say, but his first wife, mother's predecessor, she was wonderful. I loved her so much. Catherine, I'm just crazy about her. And she loved me too. I think, how many lies can you tell? I mean, I know politicians, but still, it still really does surprise us to understand what she had to go through. Well, apparently she waited a while, as we're going to see, and she eventually decided to accept what I might call a settlement. And by settlement, I mean that it was not exactly Catholic and it's not exactly Protestant. And that's what we call in America the Episcopal Church, or in England, the Church of England. Now you say, does that make her the defender of the faith? Well, apparently it did, because Elizabeth II is still using the title, even though it was given by Leo X to Henry VIII. So you think, really, maybe that shouldn't be accepted, but it is. And we also know that technically, Elizabeth was not the supreme head of the church. She would be proclaimed by Parliament as supreme governor of the church. And you think, I wonder why. And you know why. Because the debates about how can a woman be head. So I think she was satisfied by being supreme governor, and that particular title was then accepted, and probably it made the clergy a little less, frankly, apprehensive than supreme head. I think some of them may have gone to sleep under Henry VIII thinking they were going to hell, because recognizing a layman as supreme head of the church, because that's not the way they were brought up. I mean, we have to say things sometimes in politics, but I'm not sure they were particularly happy about that. So, how far do we go in this church? Well, more or less, they accept the hierarchy, the outward hierarchy. That is to say, forgive the use of the word, no pun intended, the Episcopal system. That is, they still have it this way in England. 2 archbishops, only 2, and then all of the bishops under them, York and Canterbury. It's very easy if you want to give an English history test. I mean, you ask who are the 2 archbishops, and presumably they would know that. Maybe not. I dream, people. I'm sorry. The idea, though, is that has not changed since Catholicism, more or less, was established in the 7th century after Christ. But that said, then people go to a variety of cathedrals, and I'll never forget taking students, and one Catholic student looked at me and said, "It's so unfair that these people have our property." I said, I think you need to deal with it. It's been it's been a long time, and I'm sure they would love for you all to come over anytime and have a service. I mean, the Anglicans tend to be real open-minded nowadays, so don't you worry about it. Or maybe you can have an Anglo-Catholic activity that you can meet and greet, so don't worry about that. But the truth is that if you have ever been to an Episcopal church, he's coming, Linda, right now. He's walking into the idea of the Catholic then is very clear when one goes to an Episcopal church, because you see all the aspects of Catholicism, with certain notable exceptions. You will not see the emphasis on the figure of the Mother of Christ, on Mary. And that will be very noticeable to Roman Catholics. No question about it that whole thing was just taken out. And to prove my point, I brought with me, I'm not the only one who preserves things from long ago. My friend has some interesting, but I've got one too. Mine is called the Book of Common Prayer. And this baby came out during the Ford administration. Get it? You made it. What I hear. You didn't get stopped by any police or authority? No, okay. I tried to stop you. Because if you were cuffed, I brought bail money. We could get you out.
I always carry cash.
Okay, yeah, me too. So between us, we would have enough to get you out. I'm talking now about the Book of Common Prayer, because any doubt that she went partially Catholic and partially Protestant is proved right here. Now, how can a book that came out long ago prove that? Well, the Book of Common Prayer, this particular Book of Common Prayer was printed in 1928, but it contains in it what's called the Articles of Religion. And they go way, way back. How far back? The reign of Elizabeth. Then they go for some hard reading. I don't think if you were an Episcopalian and you were having a confirmation class for kids and you would say, now I want you all to read this. And they would look at you like you're kidding, because there's so many words here that they wouldn't look up. That I don't mean to be ugly, but I'm just saying. But this basically lists 39 of them, the 39 articles of the Anglican faith. And believe me, you're not going to have to listen to all 39. So relax.
Is that what Queen Elizabeth II did? 39? She did. I thought she did 47. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just showing you what I have here.
Yeah, no. So it's somebody, or was that from somebody earlier?
No. I'll talk to you later. So
Sorry. Let
me notice that as far as these are concerned, when the articles are being talked about, they're always interesting ones that are particularly interesting. And let me notice for you a couple that I found particularly interesting, because this is quite a slap. This is number 22. And you can just tell by the title where this is going, because I never heard this word until I first read this. And I was what, 18 or 19? Romish. And you say, Oh, Romish. I love my Rome, Rome Adventures, Zamplachet, and all of the great days. No, not that kind of nice Rome. Romish means Pope people. Yeah. So this is ugly. The Romish doctrine concerning purgatory, pardons, worshiping and adoration of images as well as relics, and also invocation of saints is a fond thing, F-O-N-D thing. You say, well, I'm fond of my dog. I'm fond of my friends. Not that kind of fond. This is not a good fond. This is bad fun, bad fun. This means, I hate to say it, you're a loser. I mean, you going after that and you're saying, well, this is vainly invented, grounded upon no warranty of scripture, but rather repugnant to the word of God. That's hurtful. We are living in ecumenical times, but I don't think they had to worry about that when that was written. Okay, we're not trying to win friends and influence people. We're just saying this is the way it is. So you RCs, you better straighten out and get right. It's the idea. Oh, and here's just one more. I just have to do one more. Promise I'll stop. Number 29. Of the wicked which eat not the body of Christ in the Lord's Supper. Basically, this says they, despite the Catholic doctrine that the bread becomes the flesh because of the words of the priest in transubstantiation, that is another Romish filthy lie. Yeah, I'm talking Reformation here. Okay, so basically, it doesn't. If you're wicked and you receive it, it's just a piece of bread, loser. But yeah, damn you. And only God's people are going to receive the body of Christ. You say, those are fighting words. Well, that's why we had the Reformation and the Catholic Reformation, right? But I just thought those were just two of the greatest hits in terms of Anglican views. And then you're getting at, how does this fit in with Elizabeth? Well, I think very clearly, whatever her beliefs, if she had any, which I seriously doubt, this was the way she could go. There would still be lots and lots of ceremony, as if you've ever been to an Episcopal church. We can do all that. We've got the bishops. We can get all dressed up and this and that and the other. But no Romish ideas. Okay? And so that's considered a middle ground between the extreme Protestants, if you want to call them that, and Catholics. Does it work? Well, it worked for her because that's all she allowed. She didn't say, well, this is just the way I think. I just want you all to express your faith the way you like. I don't think that's going to work. There's one way, and it's my way. And so there was never an idea. She did find people who agreed with her, and I don't know if they were just sycophants or if they were people who may have shared her views or maybe helped her frame those views. But this is the way she took it, and we'll come back to that, what sort of pressures were on her. But as we move on, of course, we're always aware of Philip II, aren't we? He's always there. Philip II, the great Spanish king. And I guess he had dealt with the pain, the stages of grief after he lost his wife, Queen Mary. I'm being sarcastic. He dealt with that real well. Because he married, remember the Valois family? So he was ready to move on. And I believe her name was Elizabeth. But I could be wrong. But the idea being that he had many other roads to cross. He would have enjoyed it, had Mary had a child, but she didn't. So that chance passed by. It is said that he actually, this seems so incredible to me, but you may have heard the story about, what did they call that? Match.com. It's like they were looking for some dating website, and then he was actually thinking about dating the younger sister. Liz, I've heard so much about you. I think you're a cool gal. I find that so improbable. Not that she did not have male company, because she did. But it seems extraordinary to me that she would have ever entertained her half-sister's former husband as late husband as a genuine suitor. In any event, that quickly ended because he's a busy man. He's got a lot going on. And of course, the rest of the story, because after her true religious views, or at least the way she decides to go, religiously speaking, it would have been out of the question. I don't think say, oh, we can work through our religious differences. You're Anglican, I'm Catholic, but love is more important than everything. No, I don't think so. Because after all, what is Philip II? Well, he is the image of the Counter-Reformation, if you ever want one. And it's so interesting to me, because I was just reading in a book that basically Spain gets this away from France, because France is going through a lot of problems at the same time, as a result of which we don't think of the French kings in this period as leaders of much of anything. So Spain, in the sense of the leading Catholic monarch, steps easily into the role. After all, he's a Habsburg. He's the son of Charles V, for goodness sakes. And when you see the paintings of him, he's quite the hero. Many of you will have heard of the Battle of Lepanto on the coast of Greece, Lepanto. You know that, the great naval battle in which he leads the forces of Venice and various other cities, Italian cities, and they're fighting the Turks. Love to fight the Turks. And the naval victory was so great, he becomes like the cover boy for, Catholic Weekly. I mean, everybody, the Pope was saying, it was said that's the only time he ever laughed, with the joy of thinking about, go Spain, down with Turks. It's like, and this really made the Pope happy. I mean, and Philip, he's just all over Philip. I mean, Philip, at least for that time, I'm not saying, what relationship is perfect, but I'm just saying they're real close at that particular time, because, how many? The Turks really lost. Okay, it was very, very unpleasant to be a Turkish sailor at this time, wouldn't you agree? So, all in all, then, he was already the great Catholic hero. And this, of course, will be something that will become very important as we turn to Elizabeth and her success in very late in her reign, 1588, right? That when the Spanish Armada suffers that great humiliation. Again, just wearing all those clothes, do you suppose how many people must have gotten her into it, and what a relief it is to come in and take it all off? I mean, it would have, yeah. But as I say, she lived to 69, and I think until the latter time, she must have gotten up. And one thing has always fascinated me, that she must have, I don't think people then worried too much about dental care and issues of the sort. But I've read about having blackened teeth, and I'm thinking that would be unpleasant. But I'm assuming none of her subjects would have said, you know, Your Majesty, your teeth need some work. I'm thinking basically they would have, the British Dental Association would not have condemned her, or there would have been any problem. But you never see that. I'm assuming that artists know who pays the bills, so they paint you always looking good. Okay. But that said, she was probably surely in her 50s by the time this was painted. The marriages, opportunities were many if she had wanted to. It seems to me that she couldn't risk it had she wanted to, and who knows the secrets of the heart. But the idea is there are lots of men around her. What would you call them? Admirers or
Water kingdom.
Sycophants. I mean, there were genuine statesmen, to be sure, but there were also individuals who were trying, if they could have, to take advantage of her. But she never caved. And that was very smart for her. Now, is that going to be good for the kingdom? Well, I don't know, because as you know, she will be childless. And the question of the succession will be a big one, because like most rulers that I know of, she doesn't like to sit around and talk about when she's not around anymore. And I'm thinking by the late 16th century, some people were smart-mouthed enough to start asking questions. I'm sure very tactfully. You probably say, listen, lady, you know you're going to die someday, so tell us who's going to be the new. I don't think anybody would come out that boldly, but I think the issue came up and more by the beginning of the 17th century. So that had to be tough. However, there is always that great publicity about being the Virgin Queen. And of course, that brings in the issue of Virginia and how it got its name. And the fact that in addition to her various wars with Spain and France and all the rest, no pacifist she was also very interested in the possibilities of trade, which might lead to exploration, possibly interested in the India, as it will turn out. The East Indian Company, as you know, was founded during this period. And all in all, the development, the early development of colonial interest on the part of the English come about during this period. You say, where is the money going to come from? Well, that's a problem. Yeah. I mean, it's great if you have all the money, and not so great if you don't, because one of Elizabeth's major issues is how to deal with Parliament and get the money. You know, like revenues, revenue enhancements, or whatever euphemisms people use nowadays. But on the other hand, we don't want to share power with them at the same time. And so she has her issues right there, because it appears likely that she could not live on the royal revenues. I mean, the question always comes up about the sales of land. Well, I'm sorry. That was back in her father's day and her brother's day. They really sold off all those lands. And they've done something my parents said never to do. Don't touch the principal. Right? Right. Spend the interest only. Elizabeth was spending that principal. Après moi, le déluge. I know that wasn't exactly right, Jenny, but I'm trying. But the idea being that everything will be fine as long as I'm in charge. And when I'm dead, who cares? It would seem that way. You know, you got all those people, Mr. Visa and Mr. MasterCard, coming and saying, I want my money, I want my money. And, you know, she's dead. And we're going to have some new changes. We got some new rulers coming from up north. All in all, then, financial issues connected to parliamentary issues, and of course, not giving in to any of the demands about marriage. Now, as I say, she had suitors, Spanish ones, French ones, and English ones. But she decided to have, I guess you would say, a social circle, as well as, of course, political circle. Now, I think it's very interesting that no one, as far as I'm aware, ever got control over her. She took advice, appreciated advice. She had some very intelligent individuals who worked in her government, but I'm not aware that any of them were ever able to tell her what to do. She had a mind of her own. And all of this will be very important as you study the reign. As far as dealing with people who didn't agree with her views, religiously speaking, you see there the point that, unlike her sister, she treated dissidents as basically traitors against the state rather than religious heretics, because she didn't want to make it a religious matter. It is said that most Catholics who were not serious about their faith could publicly acquiesce in her ideas, and I guess go home and meet with fellow Catholic believers and do whatever they wish to do, but at the same time not do it publicly. Because it is said that most of the priests in England were able to become Anglicans. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Yeah, I never did agree with those ideas. I've just have hidden it. But the bishops had a problem, but I think they basically just said, you know, this has been a wonderful career, but I've decided to take early retirement. You know, it's like, because they're out of there because they understand that change has come about and they don't want to be martyrs. There are relatively few martyrs in the period, I must say. There were some, to be sure, but not of the level of the past. That is part of the success that she will enjoy. Now, among the martyrs will be members of the Society of Jesus, people known as Jesuits. And I know some of you know them all very well. They're fine people, they're educators, they are devoted to the Catholic Church. But in this period, they were feisty, they were new to the religious scene, more or less, and they were all fired up. And as all fired up, they wanted to go to England, and not just for evangelism. They had purposes of a more, shall we say, assassination mode, because Elizabeth was becoming more and more of a problem, as we understand. And why a problem? Because, of course, she wasn't Catholic. Because these folks are not going to say, well, you know, somebody young would say, whatever. No, we can't do that in the Reformation. These are absolutes. So, in fact, we know that there was great concern, particularly when there was a Catholic up north. And that allows us about books and movies. And can we ever get enough Mary Queen of Scots? I don't know. It just seemed like you said, no more. HBO, you know, another series. I said, what is there left to say? But apparently it just goes on and on. And you know, and I know that she was not very successful. Hurtful, that may seem, but victim of circumstance. She definitely struck out with men. She was married 3 times, but I'm not so sure. Well, we'll get into that later, but for now, let's just note that as she aged, she became more seriously Catholic. And as Catholic, and as in Scotland, that troublesome neighbor to the north, that had all kinds of, excuse me, Jenny, French connections, because we love France, but those Scots loved them too much. Okay, they had Francophilia up there in Glasgow and Edinburgh because the monarchies were tied together. After all, she had been, what could I call it, queen to be of France if her husband had lived. So very short time, maybe a year or less, and then it's all gone. Seemed like such a great idea. Her mother helped her pack, her mother-in-law rather, helped her pack up va-t-en, because you won't be, it's lovely in Edinburgh this time of year, because you're going home, lady. Anyway, the idea being that Mary Queen of Scots ended up in Scotland for what we would call a tumultuous period. But it's interesting that she becomes kind of this great symbol of Catholicism, even though some might say she was not altogether living by the tenets of the faith. However, when in doubt, you take the one that's there. So Mary, Queen of Scots, said, oh, well, she's a devoted daughter of the church, as opposed to that woman down south, that Calvinist. And so it's fascinating, isn't it, to think that she becomes, that is, Mary, Queen of Scots, becomes this great symbol of Catholicism. Oh, yes, I went through my romantic phase, the idea that she was beautiful, but she was a great equestrian, I'll give her that. And, but she loved the church, and, you know, she's going to love her whoever could get her out and in charge, because she lost her throne, as you know. All of this is to say that in this time of war between Catholicism and Protestantism in England and Scotland, Elizabeth would have to deal with Mary. Now, people often wonder, and I'm sure you have some answers, did Elizabeth really get upset by having to execute Mary? I've seen it in the movies both ways. I guess it's like whatever they have a mind to decide at that particular generation. They say, let her suffer. It's sad. And then there was, I don't know what year that was, but 71 maybe. They made a movie where they actually have a meeting. And
the one that came out, they just had a meeting.
What's that?
The one with Margot Robbie, the one that just the latest Mary Queen of Scots, they had a meeting.
No.
Yes.
Please tell me more. Do they have a, is it like, well, we're different generations, but
Secret.
oh, see, in my movie, they're on horses, and it's kind of like an equestrian get together. Hi, Mary. Hi, Liz. You know, it's that sort of like, and I'm thinking, really? Yeah. Glenda Jackson. It was a wonderful portrayal, but now I want you 21st century person, tell me about it. So they meet in secret.
Yes, at the end of the movie.
You mean how much popcorn have
After
you
she
eaten?
flees to England, I think is what I did.
Oh, and then is she sad because she has to execute Mary?
Well, I'm not sure if they show that part.
Okay. Yeah. It's amazing though how much people can do with these characters, isn't it? About Mary and Elizabeth. But the fact is, I have no belief whatsoever that they ever met. So deal with it. It's like, if we want the Disneys to make a movie about it, maybe they can do it, and it's just all a big fairy tale. But you know, it's like one of those things, everybody wants it to be true, but there's no evidence, because I don't think Elizabeth would want to see her. They were, well, you know how that goes, somewhat related, but that doesn't cut any ice, I don't think. Oh, well, we're blood kin, so, you know, I mean, we've all had to deal with these people Thanksgiving. So we understand how that can be. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to hug everybody we have to deal with and can be cousins, but they were related because, in fact, Mary's grandmother was the sister of Henry VIII, Margaret, but I believe her name was. But all of this then is to say that possibly they could have had a nice relationship, but as we know, Henry VIII executed members of the Yorkist family, did he not? It's not like I feel really bad about this. No, he didn't. It's just the way that people regard power and control, regardless of that. So, Mary had to go, and if there were some sort of crocodile tears, I don't think it had so much to do with blood relationship. It's perhaps, I hate to have to do this to a monarch. Not anybody else, just a monarch, because I don't think Elizabeth was anti-capital punishment. She never seemed to have an issue about that before. I think, but doing a monarch is rude. I mean, that's kind of bad. I don't think that's, if you think about all of the executions, not that often will you hear about monarchs being executed, right? I mean, at the top of the ladder. I mean, I've come across nobles being executed, but kings, not so much. But let's face it, Mary was a lot of trouble. And the Scots didn't want her back. Sad but true. Here she is, a little romantic. But that's okay. And notice French. And we are aware, of course, that she was related. She was part of the family. And if Francis II had lived, she would never have been a problem. She hadn't come back to Scotland and caused so many problems, then everything would have been fine. But you can't rewrite history. And so we understand the fact that Mary was there. Were there other possible heirs to the throne? Nobody who had this kind of clout, no one at this level. So she was definitely a problem to Elizabeth. And when she came, and some of you have probably actually seen where she stayed near. I think she was in England for 19 years. And you think, well, I mean, but she's royalty. I get that. And that possibly they had activities at the facility. I'm still not thinking you would like it. Prayer services, she probably had a chaplain, I'm thinking, and maybe some maids to help out. I don't know, but maybe I'm romanticizing. But I don't think she was just on the cell block. I mean, I just find that hard to deal with. But I'm thinking Mary Queen of Scots, she was there a very long time. And I guess she went out riding, or at least in the movies, they all talk about, I find, equestrian activities. And I'm thinking it couldn't have been that bad however, if you like to be a ruler, I guess this is kind of a bummer, because again, it's a not so golden parachute that you took early retirement. And because when she left Scotland, it wasn't because she wanted to. They sort of had a committee to come visit her, think August of 74. I think it's like she pretty much had to. So that was the end of that. If she could have just enjoyed her activities. But I'm thinking maybe there were some Jesuits responsible for that. I'm not saying she was altogether blameless, but I don't know about that Society of Jesus. I'm not sure. Anyway, now we get into the plots. And they did love to plot. And that's why there will be so many executions in this day and age, this particular point in Elizabeth's reign, because these people, in her view, are traitors. I mean, this is more or less the Counter-Reformation in action, and Elizabeth is going to be involved here. Could we think about Scotland as being so Calvinist, so more or less Protestant? Because, for example, if the name John Knox means anything to you, you may be Presbyterian, because he was a major figure in Scottish Presbyterianism. I've always liked what he said about Geneva. Many of us love Geneva. But he said, after he graduated from the John Calvin School of Religion, he said, "This is the most perfect school of Christ that ever was on earth." Now, that's the kind of alumnus you want. Okay. He was very happy. And then he goes back to Scotland and preaches Calvinism. And not everyone wants to convert, but a lot do. So he becomes the epitome of the Calvinist. And believe you me, if you get ratemyqueen.com and you ask Knox what you think about Mary or Elizabeth as ruler, he's a this is not the way God intended it. This is just not right. So people like Knox and others create another issue for this Scottish ruler. And of course, as I say, we are in a time of great religious turmoil. I mean, presumably, before Knox, Scotland was more or less Catholic. Not necessarily fervently so, but if it'll help, French Catholic influence was strong. Not to take anything away from the Scots, but anything to avoid the English. That's why it is said the Scots and the Franks, and the French rather, were so close and developed so close with marriages and other types of relationships. All of this, though, is to say that Mary, despite originally having a French husband, ended up coming home. And it's just disastrous, where they say, what's the cliche, bull in the china shop? I don't know. From her earliest time to the end of her reign, her abdication, her involvement with various men, as you know, and her possible complicity in her own husband's death. I don't know what the movies are saying about that these days.
I think they try to make it like she wasn't involved.
She was not. Oh, we want. Okay, so we want to.
She's the heroine of the movie.
Oh, okay. So we're paying that actress a nice sum, because if she's going to be a heroine. But it's interesting how these things are twisted, because it was said her husband, who actually was her cousin, and he's known as Darnley, Darnley, and he seemed like a good choice at the time, but he turned out not to be so good. And apparently he thought her musician was also her lover, and he may have been involved in, his name was Rizzo, and he was assassinated, and therefore Darnley had to go. And so is Mary currently exonerated from that particular deed? Whatever the case, she had been involved in many unpleasant issues. And that's how she happens to marry her third husband, because helps take out her second. So she had a very, very lively life. No question about that. But it's almost if John Knox is in the background saying, see, I told you so. But it's the idea that Mary Queen of Scots does not serve as a good example, whereas Elizabeth does. Fotheringay Castle. And you can see that, and you've seen it in many movies. Oh, I think one I saw where the dogs came out from under her skirt. Okay. Okay. Yep. We've all seen it there. That is a redeeming factor for many people. She loved dogs. She couldn't get enough, and they were right there under the skirt. And so they, after the executioner's assistance, I guess, or helping to remove the remains, the dogs come out. But she must have had a very, very difficult life, particularly as being an English prisoner during this process. And again, it makes all the movies, at least those I've seen, even television shows, about these particular events. Now, this is the one that I'm most interested in, and notice his picture. This is like super Catholic. Now, notice this particular painting. You say, oh, a wheel. Is that like Pat Sajak? I mean, the Wheel of Fortune or something? No, it's not. It's an unpleasant wheel. We like wheels, you know, steering, Captain Kicklighter or something. But no, sorry. This is a truth-telling wheel. Should we call it that? Maybe you don't remember the truth exactly. Weren't you meeting with some Presbyterians? Yeah. Maybe we can refresh your memory. Or maybe I've just watched too many cop shows. I don't know. But no Fifth Amendment for you, loser. Pius the Fifth, as you can see, was praying a lot, and he was definitely a supporter of the Inquisition. And he epitomizes the determination that this awful disease we call Calvinism. I know. Makes you itch, doesn't it? Just to say the word. And he says, you know what? We need to get them out of here. Along with all of the other mistakes that are going on in the world. Lepanto was great. Love that naval battle. It was great. But now that I'm Pope, I want even more success. How am I going to do this, though? I'm going to do something. You know, it's like I'm the Pope now. Those other popes, they were good, but I'm great. Because they're dead. I'm not. I'm here. And I'm bad, super bad. And I'm going to really show folks what can be done. I'm going to excommunicate Elizabeth. And you go like, I know. A lot of people say, big deal. Well, I'm sorry, but it was a big deal. No Pope had excommunicated an English king. And you say after Henry VIII acted so ugly, after Edward VI sort of hung out with, I know, he had never, no Pope had ever excommunicated king. 1570, he kept popes. I'm sorry?
John, The first, wasn't he excommunicated?
No. We'll talk more about
Sorry.
it. More or less, we have just the total relationship severed here. And maybe because I know what you're speaking of, but it was only a temporary move. This is a permanent move. This is merely to intimidate him by Innocent III.
Oh, okay.
But this is like, it's over. And when he did this, he made sure it's understood. I actually have the words because I wanted you to see it. And that's why I have his picture, because I think it's such an amazing thing. There's been all of these popes in her reign who hadn't done it. And you think maybe they sent Dear Liz, Dear Pope letters. I mean, but it's more or less chilly. I'm not saying it's pleasant. I'm not thinking dear daughter, gee, I wish you would, come back to the Catholic Church but they never get back, but nothing like this. And now, in red, folks, in red, this is my favorite part of the whole bull. I mean, I love it all. Elizabeth, pretended Queen of England. How rude. I mean, this is hurtful. You say, oh, I didn't mean it. I really love you to death. You're my daughter. No, you're not. You are damned. And you're an Harlot, harlot. The servant of crime. I mean, put her on the post office. Whoa, yeah. England's most wanted, baby. I mean, she is. Look at that, though. Has assisted in this with whom it's saying the most pernicious. Whoa. It doesn't get any worse. And you think, God, they must have had this whole staff working on this letter night and day, pulling it, an all-nighter to get this out.
Send it to Jesuits.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And so this very woman, having seized the crown and monstrously usurped.
From who?
The church.
Oh, they owned it. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Well, let's get that right. I mean, she's a daughter of Satan.
Right.
Okay, now we're in the spirit. The number of the ungodly. I mean, it starts, you could be the queen of the ungodly. I mean, you're already in hell. You're still breathing, but the fire is already, ooh, hot. See? That's why you're so wicked. Okay, so we'd already been restored. Do you see that last line? Restored to the Catholic faith and to good fruits. Guess who that was? Big sister. You're mighty right. But now, low life scumbag to a miserable ruin. So, what does Elizabeth say? I'm hurt, I'm sad, I'll cry into my hanky every night. No. This is basically simply the acknowledgement of reality. If there was ever, in the words of Karen Carpenter, why do we go on hurting each other? Is there any way we can come together? No, that's what I think is so important about excommunication, because there is no retrieving the relationship. And now, what do we have left? War. War against a satanic force. You call her Elizabeth, and we call her a Hellcat. Okay. I know. Shouldn't be allowed to watch the movies after, but he has regnans and excelsis. That has a nice ring to it. If you like to keep up with papal documents, reigning in heaven, That's what it means. But I know that understands though that they had a big staff writing and say, yeah, this will get her. Because it's not in any way meant to be ecumenical, or we don't agree with some of your theological precepts, but we want to wish you all the best and hope that this is all going to work out. It's very interesting, isn't it, to think. Meanwhile, of course, when you go to the Prado, you can see this famous painting of Philip II, the hero of Cover Boy for Catholic Weekly. I mean, here he is because he's the one. And of course, he is set up since his late wife had been Queen of England, Mary. He must have had dreams, perhaps, of recovering that throne. Because, I mean, he had been husband of the Queen, and as such, he had been king. But now he still had dreams of recovery by taking this throne even better for himself. But how can we ever mention the reign of Elizabeth and ignore Sir Francis Drake? Because people like Drake and others who enjoyed calling on Spanish ships and relieving them of some of their cargo became, it is said, a major factor in the breaking of the relationship between England and Spain. There were other factors, to be sure, such as English aid for Protestants in what we call the Netherlands. But Drake and others were troubling, shall we say, to Anglo-Spanish relations during those years. And think 1588. How many years are we away to Elizabeth's death? 1603. So this is in the latter stages, relatively speaking, and this depiction of the Spanish Armada and its defeat. They didn't expect this, I can assure you. The Spanish believed they were, in a sense, carrying out God's will against those wretched Protestant English. But the victory went to the English, and it was celebrated in the annals of English naval history for a long time to come. When she died, it is said that she died because she had nothing else to do. I find that very hard to believe, but that she just gave up, that she, they kept asking her, what are we going to do with the throne after you? And she refused to say. And I guess she had really accomplished a lot, and being like so many, a bit vain. She did not like to deal with the subject of life after her. But eventually she said, when they asked, it should be my cousin, the King of Scotland. She said it not with, I think, great enthusiasm, because after all, she'd had his mother killed, executed, which is kind of bizarre when you think about it, because this man was a grown man now and probably never really been around his mother since she'd been taken so long ago. When she died then, she died without any family, since there was none. And she died without her successor being around. It didn't take him long to get there, believe me. But they had much to celebrate. Now, that doesn't include devout Catholics who probably were not sorry to see her die, or others who were of different religious view, including her enemies who were in Parliament. And she had many. And why would people in Parliament? Because she wanted them to vote on the taxes and then leave. And there were a few brave souls they were, who would say, well, now that we're here, you know what we would like to talk about? We would like to talk about a more godly religion. Uh-oh, danger ahead, danger ahead. What are you talking about? I'm talking about cleaning all aspects of popery. What do you mean? Bishops? You want all of that? We want to cleanse the church. Okay. Well, maybe you would be more comfortable in the Tower of London. And that's the truth. You say, but don't you have rights being a member of Parliament?
No.
When the cell was start clanging, ask yourself, what are your rights? Your rights are to vote me taxes and then shut your mouth, because many of them will end up that way. So it's interesting. When we think about freedom, yes, she did allow Parliament to meet. She did allow a certain amount of talk, but she expected it to be her church, her kingdom. And by the way, she was no great advocate of women's rights. I mean, she is surrounded by men. All of these are men and they are serving her. But she doesn't say, well, you know, I think we need more of a balance here between men and women. I don't see that at all. She has lots of women, obviously, working on her hair, working on her, all of that. But I don't see any women who she wanted authority. It's interesting, but perhaps just a sign of how conditions were then, that she's not looking to help the cause of females. Well, I'll stop there, I guess, and see if anybody wants to ask anything before. Yeah, John. But John, Innocent Third,
I was thinking it was an excommunication, but maybe he meant it as something going
it
fast.
was, but John quickly repented.
Ah,
Yes.
This,
letter.
yeah, the idea of the Pope now is like, just, you're out. You are, because that was just such a shock to me to learn all about that, because I thought, what do you need a letter for? I don't think you all have ever really hung out or been friends, Pope and Queen, but this was it. I guess he got a copy of the 39 articles. He knew this. I mean, you know, just because you have sacraments and because you, have bishops, a Catholic doesn't make you. So that was the end of that. And the Stuarts are coming to town next week. So, yeah. So look forward to seeing y'all. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Comment to all of you. I'm very proud of you that you all turned off your cell phones.
I know.
Didn't hear one.
And she launched, I told them about the thing and talk tomorrow.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you.
So we know that. Could you, yeah, let me.